Okay, I call the meeting to order. This is the December 16th meeting of the Village of Yellow Springs Council. Judy, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Wintrow.
Here.
Asplund? Yep. Sims?
Here.
Ausch?
Here.
McQueen?
Here.
Also present are our Finance Director, Melissa Van Zandt, and Interim Village Manager, Kent Bristol.
Thank you. Do we have any announcements? Kent, any announcements? Council?
Yes,
Marianne?
I have an announcement, though I realized that it won't reach the people it needs to reach. But I just had Time Warner come and put in boxes in our TV. And so people, anyway, through the end of the year, Time Warner will put in a box to change to digital for $1.50, I think. And after that, it'll cost money. And it's definitely worth doing it if you have Time Warner. But if you don't have the box, then you're not getting it on Channel 5 anyway, so. But maybe people will tell people to do that.
Well, although we're streaming the meetings now, are we not?
Yeah, so we have on the YouTube, and it's hosted on the Community Access Panel webpage.
But is it actually streaming live? It's not streaming
It's
live.
not streaming
web.
live, yeah. It's usually a 2-day delay.
Okay. Could we put something, on the website or somehow the information, because I've heard that information from a number of people about the boxes. Could we find a way to make that information available?
access. Well,
Yeah, and they'll come and they'll put it in, hook it up and tell you how to use it and everything.
Well,
It's definitely
Judy,
worth it.
Maybe we could write a quick press release for the newspaper, if somebody could get the language for Judy, okay?
no problem.
Time Warner could probably send you the information, call them.
Anything else? Okay. Moving on to the review of the minutes of the December 2nd meeting. Page 1. Page 2.
Yes, I have a correction. Fifth paragraph from the bottom, it says that I asked that Community Resource become a designated CIC. I asked for a discussion of that.
Ask for a discussion, okay. Page 3.
Yes. There's a sentence that was repeated twice from Karen.
Yep, thank
And then, on that vote, I abstained.
Oh, but yes.
You're right, yep, thank you.
There's a typo in the second to the last paragraph. The second, or the long sentence, it said something about, something I said, but then in the middle it said, it should be, I think, but to fully apprehend the situation.
Yes.
Page 4. Page 5. Page 6. And page 7. Motion to approve is amended.
I have a question, and this is a procedural question, I guess. On the top of page 7, it says that Wintrow stated that the contract with Greene County Regional Planning is up and asked blah, blah. So where does that stand now, if the contract is up?
I'm sure it's something that Kent will report on.
You had actually decided, discussed in that meeting going month to month, Ken had recommended it.
Okay.
And I should have put that in there.
Okay. A motion to approve is amended.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Moving on to a review of the agenda, does anybody have any changes that they'd like to suggest, or staff, are there any changes that you see to the agenda, or that anybody else? So we'll keep it as it is. Lori, can you review the petitions?
Yes, I think I can, although course, what I did was send those in the mail. All right, so we had lots of letters about the CBE. Catherine Vander Heiden, President of Community Resources, support. Roberts, Hamilton, and Leventhal opposed. Dawn Johnson had some specific questions. Pardon me, about financing and other procedures. Vicki Hennessy had a suggestion about the schools pairing with the Ohio Department of Health to do weekly fluoride treatments, and the League of Women Voters had a commendation for Millard Meyer, who helped get all of the pre-election information that was put up online, questions asked by the League of Women Voters for the whole of Greene County, every single election, which is really quite a massive undertaking, and both the League of Women Voters and Millard Meyer deserve our thanks.
Thanks, Lori. Before we go on to public hearings and legislation, I want to do a little bit of housekeeping and just talk about the kind of the rules of engagement, the rules of citizen involvement in council meetings. I will recognize citizens wishing to speak, and comments will be directed to council without conversations occurring between individuals. The use of profane or threatening language will not be tolerated. There's a 3-minute time limit per person, 1 comment per person, and then we really like to look for equal time for equal view, or for divergent views. If you've already made a comment, we want to see everybody else have an opportunity to make a comment before you would make another comment. And then anybody who ignores or violates those rules may be asked to leave council chambers. So I have been negligent of doing that, of kind of establishing the rules of council. We're going to talk about it a little bit later, but I just wanted to make sure. We've obviously got a lot of people here for the meeting tonight, and I want to make sure that that was all clear before we started on discussion items. So first, we have public hearings and legislation. First reading of ordinance 2322, vacating an alley located between East South College and Marshall Streets.
Whereas pursuant to Ohio Revised Code, Section 723.05, the Village Council has determined that there is good cause for vacating an alley located west of Livermore Street between East South College Street and Marshall Street as depicted on Attachment A, alley, and that such vacation will not be a detrimental to the general interest. And whereas pursuant to Yellow Springs Ordinance 1224.02, the Yellow Springs Planning Commission gave notice of a public hearing regarding vacation of this alley 10 days in advance in the local newspaper. All abutting property owners to the right-of-way in question were notified of the public hearing by mail. And whereas at the public hearing on this matter, no abutting property owners appeared to oppose the vacation, and the Yellow Springs Planning Commission has recommended vacation of this alley to the Council of the Village of Yellow Springs. Now therefore, the Council for the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio, Greene County hereby ordains that Section 1, the Council of the Village of Yellow Springs hereby accepts the recommendation of Planning Commission and finds there is good cause for vacation of the alley, and said vacation is not detrimental to the general interest of the public. Section 2, the village hereby retains a utility easement, including but not limited to electric, storm sewer, sanitary sewer, water line, cable line, and gas line. Said easement is attached here to and incorporated herein as Attachment B. Section 3, the council hereby orders the alley be vacated. Section 4, this ordinance shall go into effect at the earliest period allowed by law.
Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I think I'll start with Lori as Planning Commission representative.
So we did discuss this, I believe it was at our October meeting, if I'm not mistaken. At any rate, it was a very recent one. And we probably, there was really no controversy with any of the neighbors who were at least present at that meeting. And the question that caused a little bit of, I think it was a slightly split vote, a 4-to-1 vote, with Till arguing that we should get an easement rather than vacating the alley. Because the alley is already blocked at other places, I am normally in favor of easement, but this seems more straightforward, simply to vacate. So that was the consent, or 4-to-1 vote.
Okay. Kent, do you have anything to add?
No, I was there and.
And you
seemed
were.
pretty straightforward.
Staff is in support and.
Yes.
Okay. I see that Reggie Stratton is here. Would you like to speak, Reggie?
Well, sure. Thank you. Reggie Stratton, Antioch College. The reason the college is requesting this is that you're familiar with the WYSO building and the Kettering building. Behind there was, I suppose at some time, an alley that ran behind the building, and now it's mostly grassed over. But the right-of-way does encroach upon the maintenance building by about 4 to 6 inches, I think it was. And then also the WYSO generator is also in that right-of-way. So that's why we're asking it to be vacated.
And I noticed that we had something at our table that was signed by Bob Ferguson of Vernay. Is that?
Yes, I went to talk to Bob Ferguson at Vernay and kind of explained to him what we were trying to accomplish with it. Their property is at the west end of the alley, and just wanted to make sure he didn't object to us having the alley vacated, and so he signed a petition for me stating that Vernay was okay with it.
Okay, thanks. And we will have one more public hearing. So this is the first reading, so we will have a second reading and public hearing where people will also have an opportunity to come forward. So thanks. Council members, any comments, questions?
Yeah, I have a question about the mechanism that's being used, because in the ordinance, it says that the village retains the utility easement, but then there's a separate easement agreement that's essentially having the college give the easement to the village. And I'm just, it seems sort of odd.
Yes. Our solicitor has struggled with this mightily. And this is his solution.
I mean, so we're depending on the goodwill of the college to give us this easement.
No, I don't.
I think it's a little more legalized than that. When you vacate the alley, the property goes to whoever owns
The
the
abut-
property up to that point, so it would
The abutting
become
property.
the abutting property owner. And so, but I'm assuming that Chris Conard has some sort of easement documentation drawn up to work with Antioch on it. It's not just, hey, guys, would you mind? I have not seen
No,
that.
Section 2 of the ordinance says we retain an
I
easement.
know.
That's a belt and suspenders approach. We're doing it in the ordinance and we're doing it by separate agreement.
Comments or questions from citizens? Seeing and hearing none, I'll bring it back to council table. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Asplund.
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Sims.
Yes.
Winthrop.
Yes. Now we're moving on to Resolution 2013-49, approving then and now certificates for the end of the fourth quarter. And council, if you notice, there is a new one on the table.
Yep.
Judy, please.
Yes, whereas the finance director has pending invoices each exceeding $3,000 for services or supplies that were ordered and delivered prior to obtaining certification from the fiscal officer that funds were available, and whereas both Section 5705.41 of the Ohio Revised Code and village policy require prior certification of the availability of funds for major purposes, and whereas the ORC provides an exception allowing retroactive certification when the requisite funds are available both at the time the purchase commitment was made and when payment is due, known as a then and now certificate, and whereas the finance director states that sufficient unencumbered money is and was available both at the time of purchase and at the time payment was due for the obligations listed below. And they are J.R. Jurgensen, $51,354.88. Green County Ace Task Force, $10,500. A&B Asphalt Corporation, $6,255. And Rumpke, $20,863.62. Now therefore the Council of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio hereby resolves that. Section 1, the finance director is hereby authorized and directed to issue then and now certificates for the obligations listed above and to pay them from the appropriate accounts upon receiving properly executed then and now certificates. Section 2, this resolution shall be in full force and effect immediately upon passage.
Motion?
So moved.
Second.
Kent, I'm going to turn this over to you. Could you just briefly explain that a now certificates yet again? We have a lot of people here that may not have heard it, so
Can I ask Melissa to do
that would be perfect, yes. Melissa? Would you need to come up to the microphone. That's the thing I forgot to say. You have to come up to the microphone if you're going to speak.
Melissa Van Zant, Finance Director for the Village. Basically, then a now certificate, it's kind of a housekeeping issue, and from my standpoint, because I've only been in the position for a week, and these were some invoices that were received prior to me arriving, so they weren't taken care of yet. And basically what a then and now certificate is that a purchase order wasn't created prior to an invoice being received, which would encumber the money or the funds required to pay the invoices. So basically, the invoice had came in without a purchase order, so we asked the council's blessing, since it's over $3,000, to be able to issue the funds to pay those invoices kind of after the fact without a purchase order. So we have to do that for anything over $3,000, and those were 4 that were sitting out there prior to me arriving.
And this is an issue that council has discussed, and I think Melissa knows that it's not something that council is particularly happy about doing, that the process needs to be done in the correct way, and she knows that that's what is going to be expected, and she is committed to doing that. So thanks for cleaning up these last few.
Problem.
Hopefully
Hopefully no more.
this will be the last.
Yes, I agree. Thank you.
Thank you, and welcome again. Comments or questions from council? Comments or questions from citizens? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now's the time in the agenda for citizens' concerns about anything that is not on the agenda. As I've said, citizens have 3 minutes to express their concerns. You need to come up to the microphone and state your name. Anything that's not on the agenda? Yeah, that probably needs to come out a little bit.
Hi, I'm J.K. Lawrence. I live at 320 Union Street, and this is a good news item. I want to thank the Human Relations Commission and for sponsoring the event last Saturday, December 7th, for people with disabilities at the Little Art Theater. And hopefully it'll be the first of many years to recognize people with disabilities, and I was very fortunate and honored to be part of the panel discussion. And I think it went very well, and so I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks for participating. Anyone else? Okay, we have...
Oops, there's one more.
Sorry. Oh.
Hi there. Hello.
Your name?
My name is Dawn Johnson. I live at 234 North High Street. And this is in regard to more on the CBE.
This is on the agenda.
It is on the agenda?
Yes.
I didn't see it on there.
It is.
It's under old
Old business.
business.
Next steps.
Okay, thank you. Joan?
Hi, Joan Edwards. This is not necessarily particularly council business, I'm not sure. This has to do with the accident that resulted in the breaking of the utility pole on Corey Street. First of all, I want to say that the village did an amazingly wonderful job on Saturday, going out in the freezing rain with the DP&L trucks. There were 3 trucks with the baskets, resetting a pole and rehanging wires. My concern has to do with the establishments that serve alcohol in our village, and I want to know if they have a cutoff point for serving someone who is clearly intoxicated, and if they have any ability to find them a designated driver to take them home, because this was a drunk young woman or drunk woman who ran into the pole, broke the pole, and eventually was arrested, I believe, and taken to the jail. And I think it's the responsibility of our establishments that serve alcohol to make sure that that the people who are leaving their establishment have a sober driver to take them home if they're so irresponsible as not to provide that for themselves. This put a huge number of people without electricity on a night that was very cold. People might have required the electricity for health needs and certainly for just living in their homes. And I don't know what the village is going to do in terms of getting this woman to reimburse the village for the costs. But I do want to thank the people who were out there in the freezing rain, and I think everyone in the village should thank them as well, because it was partly our village crew and partly the DPNL people. Thank you.
Thanks, Joan. Kent, I believe you were going to have, and since we're talking about it, why don't you give a little report on what happened?
Yeah, a driver did hit a pole. The pole belongs to Dayton Power and Light. The line of poles down Corey Street is the way that DP&L gets electricity from one side of the village to the other. They don't sell power inside the village. That's our obligation. But they do pass through town. And this pole was well off the road, what, 40 feet or more? And the person hit it hard enough to literally take a section out of the middle of the pole. And yes, they were called out about 8:30. They worked until 5:30. That was mostly our people. DP&L came and took a look and said, we'll be back in the morning. They came back around noon the next day to set a new pole. It's their pole. People have told me there were all kinds of representations on social media about, the pole was rotten, the pole fell over of its own accord, and which doesn't do much for the credibility of the social media, but none of which was true. The pole was old, but it was completely sound, and but I think our folks responded very well. I was out of power about an hour and a half. I think that's about as much as anybody was out, and so we're very grateful to them.
But I just want to reiterate and be clear that we would have been without power until the next day if our crews, what did they do? They
Oh, yeah, they actually essentially cut off, severed the wires, and went back, and we have switches throughout town that let us feed different parts of town from different directions, and they changed the switches so that people were turned back on, and then actually replaced the downed wires the next day, so.
Amazing
Yeah,
work.
they're very good.
And please thank everyone from council and citizens.
Can I ask,
Sure.
what about Joan's point about the establishments? I mean, I don't think that it's council business, but.
Well, it looks like we have, it is, I mean, the rules, obviously liquor control rules need to be enforced. We have, actually, I think have somebody from one of the establishments here that has her hand up. Is that what I see?
Christine?
Christine, would you?
Christine Monroe Beard, 421 Dayton Street. Yes, we do actually monitor our guests, and I can assure she wasn't one of ours. So, yeah, we monitor all of our guests and make sure no one leaves without their full capacity. We also call a taxi, and we also have driven people home. Personally, I've driven people home. So we do our best to make sure everybody gets home safely.
Thank you.
Christine, does the state impose or suggest standards for the operators of?
They do. They have minimums, or I would say maximums for people, but it's really hard to, it's hard to know where people have come from. It's hard to know if people are on medication, that literally one drink may send them completely over the edge. So we just try and keep our eyes peeled on everybody and make sure no one's, the state gives you a guideline of what to look for, and so all the bartenders are supposed to know this, no matter, where they are. If they're behind a bar, you should be aware, the glassy eyes, the fumbling, this, you can't
speak correctly, that sort of thing, forgetting things. So, people need to be aware of that if they're behind the bar, and we make sure our bartenders are.
Thanks, Christine. Any other citizens' concerns? Sam?
Hi, I'm Sam Young, and I just came to say thank you to council for the instant approval and speedy delivery of the resolution at last meeting in support of Glen Helen Association's grant application. So thank you.
Good luck.
Good luck.
We'll see where it goes.
Thanks. Anything else? Thank you. So the first thing we have under old business is a report on the consultants for the village manager search. At the last meeting, it was recommended by, the work is being done primarily by Brian Hausch and Jerry Sims, and council directed them at the last meeting to follow up on their recommendation on looking at a couple of consultants. So I know that they've done that, so I'll turn it over to Jerry and Brian to report.
So there is, Judy, did this get on the table, the
Which
summary, the last
Yes.
thing?
Yes.
I mean, on the outside table?
Yes.
It's here.
Okay, but yeah,
On the
okay.
outside table?
Yeah, I just want to highlight a few things because there were a couple questions that were raised, and actually, when we first introduced the idea at the meeting, I mentioned, I know the C word is something that we all, think carefully about in Yellow Springs. So actually what I did was I called the 3 municipalities that have used the consultant that we're recommending. His name's Cecil Osborne. And one of those is the village of Indian Hill, which is outside of Cincinnati, also Paynesville and Brunswick, which are up north. And honestly, I was amazed by the feedback that I got, because one of the concerns that we had is that citizens want to be an active part of the process, council wants to be an active part of the process, and we want to make sure that any facilitator understands that and respects that. And that was the main thing that I heard from all the village council members that I talked to, and I talked to 6 in total. So that was very encouraging. Jerry and I both have kind of emphasized a few things. I talked about this at the last meeting, but I'll just kind of go down the list. The first thing that we really like about management partners, Colin Osborne, is a flexible process, one that can work around what we need as a village. So they're very familiar with working with citizen groups, and that's something that we want to get involvement from the very beginning. The second thing is their expertise. I think we can't say enough about the fact that if we want someone that's going to be really high quality, that's going to provide a lot of the different needs that we have in the village, then we need to make sure that the placement is done appropriately, that we are reaching out to the right resources. And that's one of the things that I heard about this consultant, is they do have local resources that they can use. The other thing that we like is the fact that they can bring an objective eye to the process. As council, I think we've all agreed that we need some support in this process. We don't have that expertise. And so one of the things that's really nice is that they do sit down with each council member, and then as a group, to discuss what we're really looking for as a village manager. We can also incorporate other stakeholders in the community to get an idea about that, and that's something that we'll work on next if we do decide to move forward. Lastly, I think it's important to emphasize the results that all of the people I talked to spoke about. And I thought it was interesting. One president of a council, this was in Paynesville, mentioned that Cecil was able to keep the peace among the council members. And I don't think we'll have a problem with that, but what he was telling me was that everybody got on the same page, had a focus of what we were looking for, and that's something, again, that I think everybody can contribute to. So those are the main points that I want to emphasize, and if there are any questions.
Can you just take a moment to explain why you're talking just to one? And I think when we left, there were two consultants being considered.
Yeah, so no, we actually did check with, there were 3 potential groups that specialize in searches for local government in Ohio. The management partners that are in Cincinnati, the Weissman Group in Dayton, and there's also a group in Cleveland. So we did contact all of them. The other groups are outside of the state, and it didn't seem to make a lot of sense. And Don Vermillion, who had helped us before, is currently working with Vandalia on their city manager search, so that was not an option. Mary Rita Weissman, who had worked with the school board prior to hiring Mario, was interested, but last week, a project of hers expanded, and she was not able to dedicate the time in the next 3 or 4 months to this process. So that, she just was not available, but she was an equally good option.
So Lori, I know you had shared some thoughts with council, so I'd like...
Before you do that, one of the things that impressed me with this group was they kept reiterating that it was our process, not their process, in that they will do what we told them to do. What I liked, we had a luncheon, and they sat and they listened. You know, they didn't try to give us a sales pitch about how great they were. They let myself and Brian kind of talk about Yellow Springs, the issues and so forth. And then they passed out a brochure that they had prepared for, I think it's Indian Hills. And I was impressed, and they put actually what Indian Hills was looking for. Okay, and their position is that they do 2 things. Number one, when we find a viable candidate or a group of candidates, they like to sell the village to the candidate and then sell the candidate to the village versus selling the candidate first and the village second. They emphasize the village first and the candidate second. So, and the other thing I look at is the fact that time. They let us talk about our timeline, not their timeline. So again, they're looking at what is, to me, at least from what I saw, what is best for Yellow Springs and what is Yellow Springs' timeline, not their timeline. So. And again, the final thing is that even though we did get somewhat of a proposal from them, and they explained to us, we will work for you, so if the things that you need that we don't have or things that we might have that you don't need, we work with you, and then we write the proposal, which I kind of like that also. Wasn't, this is what it is, folks, take it or leave it. So.
Thanks, Jerry. Lori?
Right, it's just really helpful to have that kind of context, because the proposal is a little off-putting. It feels the opposite of what you're saying in some ways. So I had suggested changes to several of the activities that they proposed, and I'm presuming that we'd be able to do that. So.
Yeah, and just to, what your comment definitely inspired me to just kind of ask point blank everybody that had worked with them, whose process is it, and just really kind of emphasizing, that the process is directed by council and the community, so.
Marianne?
Yeah, Jerry, you said that they sell the village to the candidate. I have some concerns about that, and hopefully that'll be part of our process, because I don't necessarily think that we want to sell the village to the candidate. I think any candidate really needs to get the village, and as opposed to a sales pitch about the village. And the question is then, when and how do we have input into the process? we use these people, I guess.
From the very beginning. So part of that interviewing council individually and as a group is to find out what we want the process to be. So not just finding out what we're looking for as far as a village manager, but outlining what we're going to do step by step. And what they told me in Paynesville was that if they want to change the process, they are open to that as well. And in fact, that was one thing that Paynesville did, is they initially wanted less input because they felt very busy. Decided later that actually council needed to be a lot more involved. So they sort of restarted the process, and that was something that Cecil Management Partners were open to. So what they told me, for example, is all the applicants that they get, we get all of that. They're not separating them out and just showing us the ones that they like. They explain how they've ranked the candidates, very thorough. And what I loved was actually the mayor of Indian Hill made the comment that Cecil was an excellent listener, that they could really tell that he was absorbing what they were talking about. By the way, all these consultants were former city village managers, so they actually know what the job is about. So that was, and this recommendation initially came from Kent, in fact, which I felt really good about. And I know we want to have Ken involved in the process too.
Can I say?
Go ahead.
And this is for citizens, basically. My understanding is that they will interview each council person individually and then council as a group. And my assumption is that that will be a public meeting, and at that time, citizens will have an opportunity to have input.
It would have to be. I had the same.
So that would be,
Well, in fact, I mean, some municipalities have chosen to do it in an executive session, but we can choose to make that a public meeting.
It is a personnel issue, so we could do it in but I think it could be, I think maybe we'll decide, do we want to get a committee together pretty quickly, and or do we want to let it open to all the citizens? I think either way, I think it'll work. Do they have outlets and outreach outside of just government and ICMA? I mean, this, we've had some conversation of, should we just be looking at municipal managers?
Right. They specialize in government, but they also do corporate, nonprofit. So they do have networks in other areas.
Okay.
And in fact, Jerry brought up that idea when we met with them, that we were considering alternatives, and they understood that.
The way I look at this consultant is as almost an administrative partner, they're not managing the process, they're administrating it, they're doing the legwork and the organization and the outreach that we don't have, that our staff and council doesn't have the time and the expertise to do. So I am not in any way feeling like we're ceding over any of our responsibility, any of our control to this organization. They're just providing a service to us. And if their initial proposal didn't sound that way, I assume it was more of a boilerplate, and as we've talked about, we'll just tailor it.
Yeah, because they had prepared their proposal based upon, I think, some information that they saw before they had actually talked to myself and Brian, because they did say, well, a proposal would be coming 2 days later, and I knew that they wouldn't have time to incorporate everything we talked about into the proposal, but they assured us of their flexibility. So.
Okay. Input from citizens? Please,
Mary Ann?
yes.
I think a lot of people, even a lot of sophisticated people, take an overly simplistic view of a job search. And I'm thinking here in terms of the applicant. I'm ready to move on from my present job. I need another job. Oh, you have a job? That's great job. That's what I need. They aren't When I was in the field myself, I developed a 5-page checklist that my wife and I would share. When I went to, I got interviewed in Telluride, Colorado to be their city manager one time. And she went out and she's, what's the city library like? How are the medical facilities? Do I like the shopping? The library, do they have a bike store? Do they have a bookshop? The things that are important to us. And I was talking to the newspaper editor, the school superintendent, the line people in the public works department. So we had split up the assignment, and it's a two-way street, and it's not just, am I the candidate you want, but are you the city I want to live in?
Yeah, I was responding to the term sell.
Yeah, okay.
As we're going to tell you how great this village is. And what I meant is, I think that a village manager candidate needs to understand the kind of discourse and conflicts and passion that the citizens have, and they need to be able to deal with that, and they need to be able to deal with a council that's a strong council. So not gloss over those kind of things.
Gotcha, okay.
And one other thing is, my understanding is that we have not decided on the committee, citizen committee, and exactly how that's going to look. But so far, 6 people have expressed interest. And I think at this point, we would encourage anybody else that's interested in being involved in the process to either contact someone on council, or you can send an email to Judy Kittner at the clerk at email address. And I guess I would also like to make a motion that we engage management partners so that we can start moving forward with figuring out what our process is going to look like.
Do we know what their contract amount is?
Yes, it's in
on the last page.
19.5.
Right, okay.
So it's hard to, I missed it the first
Do we
time.
need legislation for this, Kent? Do we need, we will need legislation 19.5? I think it's over the 15,000.
Oh, okay.
It never hurts, and you are over the amount, even though it's a personal service.
So can we do that? Can we actually engage them without the legislation?
I think you can make that motion and then bring the legislation
To the next meeting, okay.
It would be, we would need a formal contract anyway.
Right,
so-
right.
Can we stipulate in that Cecil Osborne would be the
Yes.
principal?
Oh, yeah.
Actually, I wanted to say that. And that's actually in the contract.
It's in the contract, yeah. Him and I think Jerry was going to be his backup, but Cecil was.
So there is a motion on the table, is that correct?
There is.
There is a motion, nobody
It hasn't been
seconded.
seconded yet.
I second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, next item on the agenda is a budget schedule. Kent and Melissa have been working on that.
Well, Melissa's been here a week and still finding her way around.
Is the budget done yet?
We would like to propose a simplified budget process. We would like to come to you in mid-January with a basic proposal that says, we're performing these functions, and the basic cost of those functions for, on a routine basis, for personnel and services and materials, so on, is X number of dollars. And we anticipate a certain amount of revenue, and if we take the bare bones continuation budget, subtract it from the revenue, there's a gap. There's a certain amount of money left that's not been allocated, and come to you with that and a list of proposals for how to use that money. Would we make program changes? Would we do capital projects? Would we buy equipment? Would we change staffing? And do it that way. And I think that would sort of focus the process and shorten the time frame. But I don't think realistically we can get back to you much before mid-January.
So are we going to see prior year and
yeah.
comparisons, and then outlying years projections also?
I don't know about future years, but yes, I would go back probably 3 years, show you what was expended in each of those items in 2013, 12, and 11.
I guess have you seen our budget, our formatting and how the budgets have been prepared and presented in the past?
I haven't found it yet.
Oh, I mean, I've got them in my house.
I haven't found it yet on the computer that I.
Okay, I mean, I can get you a hard copy.
Okay. I haven't seen it. I don't have access to when I want financial data,
scary.
I have to go to the finance office.
I've got it from Sharon from years past in electronic form, so.
Okay. I mean, I guess I'm a little unclear of, we've been kind of hitting on the same process for a few years now, so I'm a little unclear of exactly what we're going to be seeing.
When you say sort of the operating expenses and then the gap, are you talking primarily about the general fund?
No, I'm talking about all the funds.
All the funds?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you're both obviously working on, unfortunately, on not a lot of information if you haven't had past budget documents to reference. So I will, now, do you have a hard copy, Judy, of the 2013 budget? So you can get that to each of them, and then, whatever electronic files that, okay, I would, and, there's, you can't work any faster than you can work. So maybe if after you look at that, maybe by the first meeting in January, by the 6th, if you could at least kind of report on maybe how the formatting and what, if you've had any different thoughts since you've had an opportunity to look at those budgets.
Right, maybe just kind of a written out schedule, so we have something to look at ahead of time and think about. It'd be helpful for us.
Okay.
And then we've always broken down, we typically do the enterprise funds at one time, and then we'll do general fund at another time, and capital I think capital tends to go with the general fund. But we've broken it down. We've not tried to digest the whole budget at one time. So maybe thinking that, and maybe we can also sit down, and Jerry's been through, or Lori and myself and Jerry, two of us maybe can sit down with you two and kind of go through what we've seen in the past. And we can, maybe try to do that before the end of the year. Then the first meeting in January, you can bring us what you're proposing to bring, and then, maybe starting to look at the actual budget at the second meeting in January or the first meeting in February.
Do you do it at the meetings, or do you have budget work sessions?
Both.
Well,
It kind of,
if you look at the proposed budget schedule that Laura had, that was pretty similar to what we would normally have done in terms of the numbers of meetings and how they were organized. It might have been a little bit more spread out because I believe she was trying to avoid a lot of special meetings, so doing a lot of it at meetings. But we have in the past even had like a Saturday, 3-hour Saturday morning budget workshop where we sit and look at it. And that might be necessary this year.
That's typically the way I've done it.
right, well, and typically, usually, if we're going to have a special meeting, it's about the general fund. I think that
I think we maybe even did, way back when I first came on, I think we might have even done one special 3-hour Saturday morning on general fund, and maybe one on capital projects and enterprise, I can't remember, but I think in at least one situation, we had 2 Saturday morning kind of meetings like that.
Well, and we've had evening, I mean, we have had,
And we have had long meeting
we've been in A
meetings.
and B. We've had special meetings in A and B on the budget. So we've done it, most recently, we have done them here. We have been in council chambers, and I think last year we had one special session, and I think that was general fund. So maybe Judy can help to pull together even some of the minutes from 2000. I mean, the smoothest budget process we had was last year's, was 2013 budget process, I believe.
That was probably
And so
true.
that would be, that might be one, and maybe even pull out some of the DVDs of the meetings. Okay.
And you also use those fifth Mondays.
Yes.
It's supposed to fifth
We
Monday.
do.
And when, how many do we have?
Well, there's 4 Mondays in January, so there's not a 5th, but there is a 4th.
Fourth, yeah.
I'm sorry, fourth Monday.
And sometimes we do have 5, but not in the foreseeable future. Doesn't look like.
Yeah, February's short anyway, so.
Yeah, and we've got till what, April
April
1?
1st.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to have it ready for legislation no later than your first meeting in March, so it can be adopted.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Melissa.
Yeah.
And what I said again, it's a great time to be jumping into a new job, right at budget time. Okay, next discussion item is next steps for the Center for Business and Education project. At the last meeting, we approved 2 pieces of legislation regarding financing. One to work with Squires and Sanders on the on a financing proposal, and the other to work with Connors and Company on underwriting. I know that in his report, Ken has a report in his manager's report on a meeting that they had on a conference call that I will ask him to do. The other piece of information that's in the packet right now is a timeline that, with Judy and Babette's help, I put together, basically going through from the first piece of legislation, legislative action that council took back on September 30th of 2002, up through the 2 pieces of legislation at the last meeting. Basically, just a timeline of council legislative action that has happened on this project. So it's not particularly much to discuss. I think it's just, I just did it to have the information available, because we've talked about it, but it's never really been in a concise timeline. So I think I'll turn it over to Kent to talk about, and Jerry and Mary Ann were also at that meeting. So I'll turn it over to Kent to talk about the conversation with Squires and Sanders.
Okay. There were 6 of us here in my office, Jerry Sims, Mary Ann McQueen. We had 2 other staff members, Melissa Vinzant and Rachel McKinley, our treasurer. And Jerry Sutton was there representing Community Resources, and then I was there also. And we talked about if the council wanted to finance the construction. First question was a strategy question. Are we going to do notes, or are we going to go straight to bonds? And I think the conclusion was that, given the current market for securities, the best bet would be go straight to bonds, because the assumption is that interest rates are only going to go up, so let's capture the lowest interest rates we can. So we looked at how much money we would need to finance, and the construction, aside from the grant involved, is $733,000, but you finance more than that because you allow for contingencies and project management, and you capitalize the first couple of years of interest, and then you had the cost of the consultants to actually issue the bonds, and that total comes to $978,000. So we just said, okay, let's just round, let's make it $1 million. Let's look at 20 years. The underwriter thinks that the weighted average of interest over 20 years, he's assuming to be around 4.8%. Now, the first year's interest is going to be under 2%. In fact, the first few years are probably going to be 1.5% to 2%. If you get out to 20 years, then you have to pay a higher rate of interest, because if people are tying their money up that long, they want a higher return. With those assumptions, you're financing, you're using bonds, you're financing $1 million, you're going out for 20 years, and you're paying an average weighted interest rate of 4.8%. Then the annual debt service every year would be $80,587 for 20 years. If you wanted to do a similar set of assumptions for 10 years, you would assume 3.4% interest, and $122,000 a year in debt service. And if you wanted to go for 15 years, you'd assume 4.3% interest rate and an annual debt service of $94,125. Now, all of these numbers are conservative. In other words, they're all overstated. We won't borrow $1 million. The interest rates will probably be slightly lower than that, and then the debt service would be a little less. But so that what you're looking at here is, I would say, a worst-case scenario. And that's it. If you told us tonight that you wanted to go ahead with the project, then the attorney thought they could probably have the legislation necessary for the January 6th meeting, but that's iffy. I mean, they think they can. Now, that would be both the bonds and also the legislation to create a tax increment financing district. So two different pieces of legislation.
Could you address the issue of project management a little bit? Because I see two pieces. I see one, the kind of the financial administrative piece of just kind of pulling all of this together. Now, I don't know if that's something that you're going to have the time to do, just to pull all the information together and work with the Corps, work with the attorneys, work with the underwriters. I see that as being one piece potentially, and then the other piece being the actual construction project management. I don't know if those are the same people, could be the same people,
Could be,
or,
yeah.
and how do you see that? Did you anticipate two different people potentially?
Initially, I had hoped to have one person do it, and I talked to the man who did the design for the improvements, the civil engineer, and he said he would be happy to manage the construction, do the inspections, work with the contractor, but didn't feel that he was best suited to do what I would call the paperwork part of it, the administrative part. He'd asked for help doing that. Since then, I've had a couple of suggestions for people who might be able to handle the administrative side, but you're right, given what I see when I basically come to the office to meet visitors, hold meetings, and take phone calls. And there's no actual, if I want any work done, I do that in the evening or on the weekend. So, well, that's,
Yeah.
I'm holding it down, so it's, but yeah, we would be better off served by getting someone who knows this material and does it regularly and can do a more expert job than I can.
Okay. Jerry, Mary Ann, do you have anything to add to Ken's presentation?
Yeah. One thing that I had talked to Ken about before we met was, what about us funding it out of our own reserves?
I asked that too.
And I think what we have, about half of we have about $6 million in reserve. Half of that or more is in the electric fund.
Roughly half is electric, yes.
And there'd be difficulties in funding it from the electric fund because of the way that's set up. That's a designated fund for that. So I guess maybe you can speak.
Well, when you refinanced the Bryan Center, I wasn't here at the time, you sold those notes to the electric fund, and the part of the rationale that made that possible is the electric fund was already involved in paying that debt service. They were paying a chunk of it already. So it made sense for them to hold in this case, they would not have a direct interest. I mean, prospectively, you'll have electric customers out there, but that's a bit of a stretch. They didn't say we couldn't fund it from our own reserves. They just said it would be more difficult and less likely than doing the refinancing of the Bryan Center. So they would have to do some more looking to see if that was possible.
And one other thing about the agreement, as I understand it, is that at the 5-year mark, we could pay down all or part of the principal, but we couldn't do that before then. It would be the standard.
You'd have a call provision in there that would kick in after 5 years. You could exercise it any time after 5 years, but basically at that point you could pay off or refund any part of the issue that was still outstanding. And as they pointed out, obviously you'd want to, if you were going to pay down part of it, you'd want to pay down the longest term part, which has the highest interest rates.
Jerry, comments?
No. Only
About the
be-
financing part? that-
Yeah, I understood. I got to the meeting late. The financing part I did hear, and what Ken has spelled out is exactly what I heard, so I have no issues there.
Any other comments, Brian? Any?
Well, I think we have a lot of people here to
Yeah.
speak,
I'd like to
so.
just hear from citizens.
Okay, let's open the floor to citizen comments. Please come to the microphone, state your name, and you have to wait to be recognized by the chair. And, no, I was explaining the process. And come to the microphone, state your name, and you have 3 minutes. Lori will be timing, and 1 minute, and we're going to try to alternate between pro and con. So, Dawn, go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. May I share documents with
Sure,
council? And I'll leave some outside.
And don't forget to remind us your name.
My name is Dawn Johnson. I live at 234 North High Street. I took the opportunity to talk to the county auditor today and the appraisers and ask him about TIF here in Greene County. The county currently has 2 TIFs. One is only at 15% of total amount, and that's the green. And the other is that area down by Kroger. And in both cases, the developer came with the project pretty much all ready to go. It was wrapped up with a ribbon, and then put the TIF on. And basically, it really looks like, and I put together a scenario here. I sampled properties from all over Greene County, good case and bad case, of what we might be looking at in terms of repayment of any kind of funds from a TIF from the property that's out there. And I am assuming that there would be 29 acres left over for development after the 6 acres for the right-of-way is extracted. The spreadsheet just goes along to let you know that we go as early as if we had something like the Acropolis, which is down behind the Fairfield Commons. If something could be like magic dust sprinkled on there and that Acropolis could be built in this year, I mean, that thing could be paid back in 4 months. Or if we had something more like what is behind Kroger's, those properties have been there for like going on 10+ years, and they're still generating very little money. So, and I mean, they have access to the highway and visibility off the highway and access to high speed. So there are a few that have built out there, but there are quite a few empty lots out there as well. So I just wanted to share that information with you. I did this on my lunch hour today, so if you have any other questions, I would be more than happy to help you with any kind of property-related information that you might have. Thank you.
Thanks, Dawn. Demi?
Okay, I'm going to try to keep my, Demi Reber. Going to try to keep my remarks to 3 minutes, so I'm trying to be very concise. But I have 3 basic concerns about the CBE. One is that the village would be risking taking on a debt of more than, of what we just heard, of $1 million, at a time when there are other pressing issues calling for large expenditures, like replacing our water plant and fixing infrastructure in the Fairacre neighborhood. So I want to know, what does this borrowing do to our ability to borrow for those things? 2, that the goals as presently stated present a narrow view of economic development. First, the promise of jobs and tax returns to the village can't be achieved only by the development of an industrial park. We should look at CBE as part of a larger picture, with considerations about other collaborations in town with the college, Antioch Publishing, growth happening in these places. And when we talk about jobs, we should talk about creating meaningful work and job training, and there's a lot more to say about that. But also that the search for businesses to inhabit the park will not benefit the welfare of the village unless it's guided by interests in finding businesses consonant with our shared values. I'm disturbed by the possibility of being seduced into Miami Valley's new infatuation with the business of making and testing drones. I want us to look for renewable energy businesses, businesses related to sustainable agriculture, local food processing, meeting other local needs in multiple ways. 3, that we don't consider lending sums of this amount unless there is a way for council and citizens to have a serious official voice in decisions about how to build, who to invite, or allow to develop. It's my understanding that council voted unanimously in October to ask CR to become a CIC, which would mean CR would have meetings open to the public with a percentage of members appointed by council, a percentage by township, and a percentage appointed by CR. I don't know where that discussion is now. I don't hear anything about it. I'd like to know about that. Finally, I'm concerned about not having this discussion and the creative work that it suggests we need to do be short-circuited by council's outlay of considerable funds to explore bond issues. So I just hope that the fact that we're already spending money without having decided doesn't begin to lead us by the nose. And I'd like to see a clear tally of what we're putting out all along the way for all these years to create this, what it will cost over the years. The payback is many years down the road and is an uncertainty in any case. Thank you.
Thanks, Timmy. Anyone else? Michael?
Michael Jones, 790 Wright Street. So, to start off, I favor some order of business or business park. My problem is, it's allied with all the points that Dimmy made, and I will add to that, in the military they have a term called mission creep, where you send some troops in and you don't have a clear objective, a clear picture of what you're trying to do, and it just goes on forever. Iraq, Afghanistan, today, okay? And in the business world, it's called a business plan. So at this point, with the village having extended a $300,000 or $200,000 interest-free loan, and now being asked, and early on, there was actually the architectural firm of Lawrence and Williams generated a total master plan, the anchor of which was going to be what was then termed Antioch McGregor, now it's Antioch Midwest. Somehow, that whole episode has been forgotten or shelved or whatever. So we don't really know what it might look like. We don't know, as Dimmy says, who's going to be there. Dimmy is concerned about some of the enterprises that are concerned with, allied with the military industrial complex. I would suggest also, on what basis would a publisher of sexist, misogynist, and racist literature be excluded as a possible tenant? Or would an enterprise that makes, that produces pornographic videos for the internet somehow be able to be on campus? Both of those, I think, would be anathema to this town, you see. But I didn't hear at the forum any discussion of mechanisms by which the occupants are thoroughly vetted. And I would add to that if the village is going to, the people of the village are going to provide funds for the infrastructure, that they have to have a say, precisely to maintain our collective values. Beyond that, at the forum, I heard discussion that what we're trying to do is capture real estate tax revenue. But early in the process of talking about a business park, there was much concern about the loss of income tax revenue with the departure of Renee and the downsizing and then the closing of Antioch College. So I'm wondering,
Your
has...
time is up, my...
Finish your thought.
Okay, so I'm wondering if these figures have been quantified, and how does that translate into the kinds of jobs that are necessary? In other words, the aggregate salary levels that would generate those orders of income tax revenue. And I think that then, okay, last thought, this all needs to be put out as a formal proposal, not just to the council, but a comprehensive formal proposal written up and put in the newspaper as an insert for the whole town to simply read. Because
That's it. That's all, Michael, come on.
it wasn't enough for 100 people only from this town to go to the forum.
Thanks,
The
Michael.
town's bigger than that.
Any other comments? Steve? Yeah.
I'll be quick. I just got a couple questions. I wondered, has the village...
Who are you?
I'm Steve Deal, live at 131 North Walnut Street, the Gaunt House. I just wanted to find out if the village has performed an independent risk analysis. And I'd like to know if the village has performed an independent cost-benefit analysis with time phasing on it. And I think one of the things that we heard, and I noticed from the website, that as this thing moves along, transparency for the village is going to be really important. There were a lot of things at the forum that weren't really very transparent to villagers, and that's going to make it difficult to move forward. Some of the decisions that are being made sort of in an old school fashion, and I think businesses today will appreciate that transparency because they'll know better about what they're in for when they do decide to sign on. So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Isaac?
My name's Isaac Delamater. I live on Walnut Street, employee of Antioch College. I just wanted to express that I would be in full support of council denying funds for this project on the grounds that I'm opposed to the further destruction of valuable agricultural land and opposed to development. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments? Sharon?
I'm Sharon Moeller. I have questions. I want to know what happened to the discussion about the water. I don't even know why we're having this discussion, because we're talking about a great lot of money that the citizens are going to be expected to help with. And I read all about what terrible condition our water plant is in, and it's going to have to be replaced, and I know that our water lines and our sewer lines are in bad shape. To even have this discussion, to me, is like talking about building onto your house when you don't have enough money to fix the toilet. Thank you.
Other comments? Bob, did you raise your hand?
Yeah.
Oh, come on up.
Bob Baldwin Jr. For probably 60 years, I've heard it said that council and Antioch can talk issues to death. That's often true, but sometimes I think it's a good thing. There's a high degree of interest in the whole village about the Center for Business and Education. The dialogue so far has been quite civil. And if I had to make the decision tonight, I don't have enough data to really make an intelligent decision. Number one, I don't really know what building space is available right now. I know Antioch in the early 70s had 2,000 students. Now they have 200. There have to be a lot of spaces over at Antioch. They're now tearing down 2 dorms that could have been incubators, I don't know. They're talking about tearing down the student union. we don't know what's going to happen to Fells. There's a building out here called I-1. That's a well-built building. It's been sitting there for sale for about 3 years, and nothing has happened. Now, that should tell us something. It tells me, number one, that when businesses think about coming into town from out of town, one of their primary concerns is cost of business, cost of building. If the business was spawned locally by people that want to stay here, that want to see the schools thrive, the tax duplicate thrive, they have less interest to a degree of the building cost than the out-of-towners. Now, and the final thing is, when Antioch Publishing sold 95,000 square feet, 30,000 was open warehouse, but still, at $100 a square foot to build, we're not talking about the 12, 14 acres, 95,000 square feet times $100, I didn't believe my math, is $9,500,000. It's sold for $700,000. It's no wonder. And it still took people over a year to figure out this is a damn steal. So once you get all these things together, I couldn't make a decision until I know about what's going to happen down the road. Some of it's tied into the Chinese and the stock market. It's at a new high. The Chinese are rattling their saber, protecting their airspace. They're building a couple new carriers. I think the next 12 months is really going to be a sleigh ride. So my last comment is I am encouraging caution and deliberation. You may lose the 400,000, but you don't know. There's always another grant, and nobody can write grants better than Yellow Springs people. Trust me. So I'd say delay. Take a deep breath, delay. Let's see what we got. Thanks.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks.
Anyone else? Other comments? Dan? Sorry.
Oh, hi. Dan Reyes. I'll try to be brief about this. This is one of the comments that doesn't fit into the for or against, and I posted counsel on this over the weekend, so you guys have seen a bit of my thinking on it, but it's occurred to me that there are some opportunities that we perhaps risk missing if we don't take some time, as Bob was just saying, to examine what's on the table. And I'm looking at that a little bit differently than perhaps the other speakers have, but examining actually what's on the table as a design proposal before you. And the reason I'm saying that is that there are a number of implications contained in the design that affect basically, it's not simply the scope, but the expense and the impact of the whole project that may be before you. And also trying to think a little bit about the role of the village and council in this, which is different than what usually comes before you, whether it's a planning or zoning issue, which has a developer who owns a project, who has an interest in a project and wants your permission, who's looking at you as a gatekeeper to say yes or no to a project. In this case, you're the principal, we are the principal financial agent for this project. We are the client, in effect, and can determine the scope of the project, the intentions of the project. So it's a greater range of opportunity and also a greater range of responsibility for the community to do what is intended by the community, to try to bring forward the results that are useful and beneficial for the community. So in that respect, I would suggest taking a bit more time to look carefully at what's on the table, and particularly in light of some of the concerns and some of the questions that have been raised in the months since August, when this came up as a formal proposal for the village, to take some time and figure out what the right size, what the right extent, what the right elements might be that are worthy of consideration on the part of the village for trying to move ahead in terms of some positive growth for the community, but one also that keeps our capabilities and values and other assets in place, that doesn't unnecessarily disturb things that are already working for us. So I guess perhaps that's enough for now, but I have some concern with the notion that that Kent brought at the beginning, which is maybe it's fair to give you guys the notice that you could bring legislation forward to vote on in January, but I think it would be better to spend some time to examine what you're intending to do before you legislate. Thanks.
Thanks, Dan. Let me see if there's any other comments to me. Jerry?
Jerry Sutton. I've been here before on this topic. I'd like to thank you for the timeline. 22 acts of resolutions or ordinance by this body over the last 11 years, all pushing it forward. Just to remind, the last speaker spoke on essentially a redesign, is what he's saying. Got to see this, look at that. To remind everybody, it's included in your timeline here, but the village ran the design process. The village accepted Department of Transportation money, the tune of about $500,000 or $600,000. Part of that went through the design, about $250,000 spent on the design under contract to the village. That money didn't come to CR, came to the village. Village signed a 42-page agreement that tells how to do that. It was designed to the criteria specified by Ohio Department of Transportation and use the Ohio Department of Transportation process. Reviewed at all 3 steps, and the village finally approved the drawing. I would venture to say there's probably no more thorough design review. That took 3.5 years. I would say it would not be prudent at this point to step back and start redesigning the project. It's kind of at the point of an up or down vote. So, I'm saying a lot of thought had gone into the design. The village was immersed in that whole process. They drove the process, and I just ask you to press on. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Paul? Paul?
This is like pulling teeth for me.
Paul D. Laverne. I live on South College Street. I've lived here about 45 years, and Michael Jones mentioned that you should put a handout in the paper for everyone to look at and maybe get involved with this. We've already done that years ago with the visioning process. It was quite well attended by some. The number one thing that seemed to have come up in that visioning was the economic growth of this village. Number one, over and over. We started this almost 10 years ago. It's been sidetracked, derailed, and kind of stepped aside upon. The one thing I hear from everybody that's against it, one underlying theme is fear. Fear of everything from global economic collapse to getting the bad people come to our town to build military things, to it'll just fail. It'll be like all these other places around. We're Yellow Springs. We're different. This place, the 45 years I've been here, was maintained and sustained by 4 major industries founded by Antioch graduates that took big risks. In a small village in the middle of Ohio, 4 major industries, and a vital college, which in '71 had almost 2,000 students. Almost that's gone now. We've got Mobene, which has 1/4 of the people it had. Many of them used to live in town and pay our income tax. Vernay's not only took their foundation literally, but figuratively. And now we get this much property tax on a brownfield. We need this Commerce Park. We can't keep coming back and taxing the elderly and the lower income homeowners with property tax to run the village. 7 years ago, I changed my mind and voted for that levy, put a letter in the paper. That darn thing passed by 1 vote. I've kicked myself every day, particularly 2 years ago when we renewed it. It wasn't meant to be a sustainable underwriter for the village. It was meant to be a jump up to get that thing going and to get us going into the kind of life I had and we've had for 60, 70 years in this town, thanks to 4 or 5 Antioch people who took the risks that we seem to be afraid to do now.
Thank you, Paul. Hold on, Jimmy, I saw somebody else. There was, I know, but there's somebody else that hasn't spoken yet. Who raised their hand who hadn't? Yeah, okay.
My name's Matt Carson. I live on Pleasant Street, and I'm kind of amazed by all this. There is no plan. Like that's the thing. There is no plan. There's no businesses that are moving in. It's just throw $1 million at it and see what happens. I mean, if that works, I mean, do you guys want to buy a bridge? I got a bridge for sale in Brooklyn. It's a great deal, you know.
Chrissy.
My name is Chrissy Cruz. Before I say anything else, I want to say that it greatly concerns me that you brought up this idea of perhaps the next meeting we could vote and go straight ahead with legislation. I recall quite distinctly that people asked in the last council meeting if voting for this bond sourcing and underwriter resolution meant that we were committing ourselves to anything, and I recall being assured that it was only a first step in figuring out what our costs were going to be, that we weren't rushing into anything here. So that really concerns me. I want to point that out, first of all. Secondly, we are currently passing a petition around the village. The petition is against the funding of the infrastructure of the CBE project with our community tax dollars. It's not a petition against the CBE, just against public funding. It says the village should conform to the comprehensive plan as a policy guideline, which clearly states that developers are responsible for the cost of their own infrastructure. We don't believe it's in the best interest of our community to expend our limited resources on a project that has no provable value or return on that investment. Every economist cited on this project has spoken against it. And due to the privacy of the organization backing the CBE, we have no assurance that our community values will be respected as this project is developed, which is a theme that has been brought up again and again this evening. If the present council takes additional steps that would ultimately culminate in public financing of any aspect of the CBE, then we will consider any democratic redress as permitted under Article 8 of the Village Charter in order to halt this process. And if anybody would like to sign the petition, we have it here tonight. It's also at the Emporium and at Starflower Foods. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that hasn't spoken yet? Sue.
I'm Sue Abendroth, and I live on Rice Road, and can't think right now of the phrase, full disclosure, I have just last month become a member of the CBE board. I don't know very much yet because I've just been involved in that, but I have followed the discussions for the past decade about the CBE. I've observed council working in cooperation with community resources to bring this forward. And I have some other comments which I will quickly read. The fact the cost of living for village residents has taken a big hit in the past decade or so is well known. We all should be familiar with the litany of reasons the financial sustainability of Yellow Springs has eroded. It's not recent news. I can't imagine any scenario in which the village can continue to provide the same government services we have now unless the local cost of government is covered by increased revenues. Can you? I value those services, and I believe you do too. Is there any reason to believe that the residents, owners, and renters alike can be expected to pay ever higher property taxes to make up budget shortfalls? Is there any reason to believe that residents don't expect government to provide the basic services only government can provide? Streets, water, electricity, wastewater, public safety. Is there any reason to believe that the cost of those services won't go steadily higher? There's been a community consensus for a long time that jobs are needed. That fact was recognized in the visioning process, which made investing in economic development a priority. That fact was recognized when the taxpayers approved and then renewed a tax levy that set aside funds specifically for economic development. That fact explains why residents invest in our schools, in part to make the community attractive to potential newcomers. That fact provides the rationale for community resources volunteers who worked long and hard to save the Antioch Midwest jobs and bring the CBE to fruition. I submit that fact is still true and still a reason to invest in the CBE. Villagers have had the opportunity to participate in discussing the CBE for a decade or more. Why then is there all of a sudden an extremely vocal minority of activists lobbying for more process, more delay, more input, which will probably end any hope that the village will broaden the income and property tax base for years to come? Assuming the village can afford to do everything it does now, let alone doing other projects that some lobbying groups want, without a broader tax base is, I submit, irresponsible. I have another paragraph I'd be happy to share. Thank you.
Okay, you can come back up again after we've heard from everyone. Carol?
Carol Cobbs, Dayton Street. I think I have more questions than comments, but I have been struggling with this. In fact, I bugged Jerry at home, Kent twice, and tried to talk to Karen, and my brother has forbidden me to come back to discuss it anymore with him. He's rather tired of it. But I've really been struggling and trying to learn and want to do what's best for our village. From what I hear, I think the majority of us aren't anti-growth. I don't think anybody clearly just doesn't want the CBE there. I think that a lot of them are struggling as far as who is going to take the risk. I know one person had mentioned about how Bernays and others here have made a great impact on our village and took risks, starting with one room over to Antioch University, where a couple of my relatives started out working there. Bernays, when he brought that up, I have to admit I got a little perturbed because I think they left under different circumstances. And I can't say that I'm really glad they're gone because of the things that were happening there. But I don't feel that I would personally want to take the risk, and I know it's about more than me. But the other thing I wanted answered was when the gentleman, someone said something about 10 years. I know this has been ongoing, but when did someone actually ask for the money? That seems to be the different thing. Am I correct in that? Can I get an answer?
You mean this
At the-
most recent
yes.
money for the infrastructure was this year?
I think that's when it changed. That's my gut feeling. So I think it's unfair to say that everybody's been opposed to it for 10 years, when I think the opposition started when it was said that, well, you all may have to take up the slack. I'm still somewhat undecided. It sounds like a dream if it could come true, but I just think there's too many possibilities that it may not, and I would like for you all to take the time to find out more yourselves, answer a lot of these questions that I heard tonight that I think were good questions, and then make a decision.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Carol. Last call for new comments, then we'll get a final comment from Demi and from Sue if she would like to come back up. Oh, Paul's coming up, and then Christine.
Paul Avendroth. I would just ask those that are organizing an opposition to this project to come up with a viable Plan B to bring jobs to the community, one with firm numbers and forecasts and business plans and all of the other things that seem to be very important to have right now for this project, propose a Plan B, which will bring jobs, income to our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Christine?
I think the points have been well made for the opposition to this. I think that it is exactly that it's being, the citizens, the taxpayers are being asked to fork over $1 million. That is kind of suddenly. And I wonder why council members feel that this is a good risk. I wonder why that is when it's been analyzed by many economists who feel that it's a bad risk. So it's a very simple question. Why do you think it's a good risk? I know that in the conversations I've had with business leaders in the Dayton area, they don't see anything on the horizon. They really don't. There's not a renaissance coming to Dayton that they can see. So I favor the benefit cost analysis, and also I don't believe that I am operating from fear. I feel that this is self-defense. There appears to be a kind of smash and grab to get the tax money to fulfill some kind of dream, and I just don't see it. As I've said in the paper, I believe that it's wrong for the village to fund the building the infrastructure at the CBE. I also want to add, I don't really want to be in this fight. I don't really want to be here, but it is a large sum of money, and I don't believe in the economic model that you're putting it towards. I believe it is a model from last century. I don't believe that it is sensitive to our current state of affairs. And it certainly is not forward-thinking if you consider the environment that we are in from an ecological and also economic point of view. Now, I do realize that most economists agree that government funding of private industry is a dangerous move towards the reallocation of funding to the wealthy. And I do realize that everybody does it with mixed review. But this is the very crux of the problem of our national government. We have an unbearable national debt. And it is as a result of this kind of it's not appropriate for government to fund business. It's just not appropriate from a kind of puristic sensibility. This is a model I don't believe in. But beyond that, as I began, our local economists just feel it's a bad risk. So not only is it immoral in some views, but it's also unlikely to succeed. It will probably fail. And I think that's, oh yes, and I do want to bring up one more time the point that it is in direct opposition to our comprehensive plan. So how do you explain that? Thank you.
Demi, 1 minute.
I don't know if you can answer them tonight, but I did raise 2 questions in my earlier statement, and one is, what does borrowing for the CBE do to our ability to borrow for the water plant? And the second question is, what happened to the decision that council made in October to request that the CR become a CIC? Where is that discussion now? So if it's possible to answer tonight, that would be great.
Thanks, Demi.
Can I answer?
Sue, excuse me, Sue, do you?
I have one more paragraph. Okay. I think it's fair to remind ourselves that council has invested tens of thousands to further affordable housing projects. Tens of thousands more have gone to preserve farmland outside the village. Tens of energy-saving lights have been funded. Refurbishing the downtown to make it attractive to visitors has begun. Council has made costly investments to make our town a better home for all. These investments have not increased our tax base to any meaningful extent. So how about now investing in the CBE to bring more tax revenues to make our town more affordable in the years to come. Village government has been involved in that effort for years. There's plenty of reason to believe, as many council members before you have believed, that creating a place where other Klein Associates, EnviroFlights, homegrown entrepreneurs like Dan Dixon can do business in our community and will help keep our amenities affordable. Thank you.
Sue. Dawn, one last 1 minute.
It's very short. This is, again, is about my conversation I had with David Graham earlier. And first thing he said, this was the first he'd ever heard that there might even be a TIF out there on that property. He thought that was sort of unusual. And that he also said that unless there's construction, unless there is buildings, unless there are buildings, it will never generate money to cover the cost of the TIF. And it will be on our backs. That's it.
Dan, 1 minute, and then that will be it for public comment for tonight.
Yeah, I did want to offer a sort of direct response to a couple of comments that were out there. Certainly one of the things that I wanted to say, and this is to a remark Paul made not long ago, that there are Plan Bs in a sense on the table. One is a scenario that I put out for you folks in that brief note that I sent this weekend, which is a change of scope within the design parameters as they exist right now. And it could be a significant change in the cost expenditure for this project if one would, for instance, consider that. The reason I want to suggest that is not to take up as much time as possible, but that design and cost estimating is cheap compared to construction. And it's good to do these things beforehand and get it right before you start getting bids and contracts and bulldozers working out there for things that are going to go 10, 15, or 20 years in terms of the payback. So spending a little bit of time, I'm not saying that what I spelled out to you is the ultimate answer, but spending a little time to look at a couple of options, to do some targeted cost analysis, would seem sort of the minimum prudent move at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Kent, you had wanted to comment?
I just want to mention to Dimmy, there was a comment at an October meeting that one council member said they thought that the community resources should be a designated CIC, but it was a comment by one council member. There was never any action, never any vote.
I talked to Judy Heflin.
Judy's the one who made the comment.
That council had voted unanimously. The request of CR, is that...
We all agreed that, we did agree that we would like them to explore it. It was an exploratory discussion. There was not a requirement.
I know it was, that's what she told me, that it was
Right.
a request to CR to consider becoming a CIC. And so my question is where has that conversation gone?
My sense is, I mean, it's, Mary Ann has brought it up in her proposals, but the sense of it was that we would need to get a decision about this funding, and then if we decide to go forward with funding the infrastructure, then that conversation, that exploration has to take place. That was my understanding of the timeline.
I mean, what we're really talking about right now, and what Kent and I was certainly expecting, and I think the rest of council was probably expecting, that we would be seeing legislation sometime in the next couple of weeks. I don't think that there was any intention that, I have expected us to be planning on going forward to talk about going forward, to take a vote, for the exact reason that Kent describes in his memo, and that is that if we don't start now, if we don't make a decision now, we will miss the 2014 construction season. So that is the decision before us. Any change, any major modification to the plan, to the will not allow us to go forward in that time frame. We essentially have to bid out the drawings as they exist. And so that is really what we're talking about. There are other issues to talk about. I think that Mary Ann has brought up a lot of things. Other people have brought up a lot of things. There are things like the designation that can happen in parallel with that happening. I believe that the decision before and discussion before council is how committed are we to the 2014 construction season, and the concern over the potential loss of the $400,000 from the Army Corps of Engineers. No comments from the floor. No comments from the floor.
One other thing.
I would like to object. I really object. There's a fundamental issue.
Michael, no, I'm sorry.
Wait, there's a fundamental...
If you come up to the microphone.
All right, the issue is simple. The CBE conferred in private. People who participated in those conversations were invited. It was not that planning process was not open to the public. If it becomes a CIC, it has to be open to the public and transparent. And the reason this is pivotal is you're asking the people to put up the dough. And if you're going to do that, they have to be guaranteed the mechanism for their participation and for transparency. And if you don't do that, it's immoral.
Thank you, Michael. I will state that there is a 2-page document that has resolution and ordinance after ordinance, that this was all done in public. These were actions that were taken by council in a public meeting. So Michael, there is no comments from the floor, please.
The other question of Dimmy's was, if this project is funded, these will be general obligation bonds. If there's work done on the water system, those are revenue bonds funded by what you pay on your water bill. So
Could you just explain to me, though, does our ability to borrow on one affect the other? That's
No.
my basic question.
Kent, I think you had also answered another question that Dimmy asked. The percentage of our budget that would come from paying the $80,000 a year?
Yeah, the annual cost, if council borrows the money, is around $80,000 a year. That's about 2/3 of 1% of our budget. It's not inconsequential, but it's not a bet the farm proposition either, so.
That's the financing part.
That's the financing.
Right.
May I ask a question?
No, we're not taking any more questions from the floor.
That'd be great.
Council, comments? Mary Ann, do you want to start?
Well, I tried to summarize things that people in the audience said, and some of them were questions. So Kent just answered one. Another question that several people asked was what kind of control we would have over businesses. And I understand that there's already in the PUD some listing of the kind of businesses, but I should say, and I do think that I would want to have some kind of assurances that we could limit certain kinds of businesses. I'm not particularly concerned about pornography, but I would be concerned about things that are going to be like drones for the military that are going to go over anyone, I guess. And I don't know if we have an answer for that. But I would say if the village is putting in all this money, that I'd want to have a fair amount of village oversight and control over the kind of businesses. Also, Community Resources is a CIC. It is a Community Improvement Corporation. It's not a designated Community Improvement Corporation. That would change that would formalize its relationship to the village. As far as I know, there's been no risk analysis or time benefit analysis. In regard to, Sharon was asking about the water and the sewer. I think the holdup on that is we have not gotten the promised proposal for the cost of doing a repair that was supposed to have been 2 months ago.
But it's on our
coming.
agenda. It's
But
on our
coming,
agenda for
and
January 6th.
Clearly, council will be dealing with that. I did talk to Dan Reyes today, and we're going to be talking more with him, and I think that he has some ideas that are worth exploring. In regard to the comprehensive plan, it's been stated that the comprehensive plan, I think, implies that the developer would pay for the infrastructure. That is stated in the comprehensive plan. I don't think that it dictates that. I don't think that it requires that, but it certainly implies that the developer will pay for the infrastructure and then the village would take it over. People have been addressing the concern about the CBE itself. We're just dealing right now with this, looking into funding. But I guess what I would say is that, I've said to council that, and I'm not going to read what I wrote, but I'm concerned that council, that we're getting back, that we not back into this. And what I mean by that is that we not sign all the papers and then go, oh my God, what does this mean? Because I don't think that we really have done that kind of due diligence work yet. And I've said that I'm not comfortable moving forward unless we commit to doing that. And I think a piece of that is having an economic development strategy for the village that encompasses the CBE and a number of other things. And I also can imagine, especially from talking with Karen, that such a economic development strategy implies not only that the village would have a part in that, but individuals and businesses and educational institutions and the chamber. And it would have to be something that would really be broad-based, because the village doesn't have the capacity to do that kind of thing. Plus, it needs the cooperation of everyone. So, and I guess in terms of the community, I've talked to people who are vehemently against this, and some of the people are in this room, and I've talked to people who are vehemently for it, and some of those people are in this room. So clearly we have a wide variety of views, and then there's the big middle section that maybe they don't even know this is going on, but it concerns me when views are held so strongly and so assuredly as if we know what's right and what's moral. And clearly, we don't know that. But I do believe that the only way that I believe this can be successful if we have enough people that get behind it. And if we do end up having a big fight, that could not only lessen the chances of this being successful, but lessen the chances of anything being successful. Because when people have put years of work into something and then they see that something demolished, it's very demoralizing. Very demoralizing. And the time that's taken up with fighting could be better spent, I think, I don't think it has to be an either or. I think it can be a both and. And I think I think we have enough resources, people resources, to do those things. So I'll stop.
Thanks, Marianne. Brian?
And actually, I love the last thing that Marianne just talked about, because what's been really important to me over the last couple weeks is to think about the positive opportunities that we have here. And I think it's very important, because I've heard a lot of discussion about what about some of these short-term fixes, but also recognizing that we need to look at long-term fixes. And when I see the amount that we're considering investing for the potential long-term benefit, less than 2/3% of our annual budget, that really resonates with me. I also think we have talked about this issue a lot. It was very central to the campaign. We've also continued to have this discussion for 2 more months. And a lot of it is really coming down, for me, to subjective opinions. All right, well, that's the same thing, subjectivities. And basically the idea is, we all have different levels of risk tolerance. We all have different preferences that we want to look at, but I think it's very important that we do think about our long-term economic viability as a village. One of the things I mentioned before, and I'll mention it again, is this move would not preclude other things that we could do. So as was mentioned before, if there are other great proposals that would affect the short term, that could build our existing local businesses, we would love to hear that, and we would be very open to it, I think, or at least I would, and that's what I hear from the rest of council. The second thing is we have done a lot of due diligence, and in fact, one of the things that I'm working on now is how do we market what's unique about Yellow Springs, because that's really how we are going to sell potential businesses on moving here. We have a lifestyle that matches, no others match. We have unique aspects of our community that we can really leverage. And again, the piece that Marianne said at the end about getting together, I think is really important to consider at this point. And I think that's what I need to say.
Thank you, Brian. Jerry?
I don't have any comments.
Okay. Well, I have to confess, I am feeling, I'm concerned about I've been supportive of this project, but I am probably most concerned about some of the issues that Dawn Johnson raised both here and at the forum in terms of just how long a return and how likely a return is on this investment. So that's, I think once we start talking about $1 million in financing and looking at those notes, I realize it is $80,000 if it's over 20 years, and we would have to be thinking about it as a 20-year project. That's part of the cost. I guess my other probably biggest concern is whether we at the village have the kind of I guess organizational capacity to keep this, to do the kind of work that Marianne, I think, is really well outlined, that it would require a kind of total development model, and we haven't really done very well at that, at least since I've been on council, and so I take responsibility for that. So I think the more I've heard, actually, I've had greater misgivings rather than less, and I don't think they're coming out of fear so much as that they're coming out of, is this a kind of project that actually is better handled by the private sector than the public sector? Because these private-public partnerships are messy and difficult. Doesn't mean that it's not necessarily worth doing. We've managed certain kinds of public-private things in the past. But I do think we need to be pretty clear about what we're in for, and making sure we have the energy and the wherewithal to do the things, not just the $80,000 a year, but the other work that would be necessary to manage the project and get the project brought to completion. That's probably where my largest misgiving is, particularly given the concern about just exactly what kind of return on investment we're talking about. So that's really where I am, which I realize is not a very clear answer, but that's where I am in terms of my anxiety about the project and my own misgivings.
Thanks, Lori. I've reviewed Marianne's letter, and she and I have met, and we've talked quite a bit about this, and the whole idea of a marketing plan or an economic development plan for the village, and it's absolutely, it is necessary. We actually have a great skeleton plan with the economic sustainability plan that was created a couple of years ago. Refunding and revitalizing the revolving loan fund, that is something that absolutely needs to happen. We have the bones for all of these things that you're asking about. Energy efficiency, we've got the Efficiency Smart program through AMP that has already helped a lot of businesses. So we really do have a lot of the bones for some of the things you're looking at. Continue to work with Tecumseh Land Trust to protect and create the Jacoby Creek. I mean, I think we're absolutely committed to that, and we also have the urban service boundary that John Eastman has already explained. It's gravity sewer. It's as far as gravity sewer can go, so there really can't be development beyond that unless we allow lift stations. So we control that. We control how far development goes. And as Brian said, he's working on a plan. I think I would like to have a little bit more understanding. Kent has said that he needs he'd like to work with a consultant to help pull all of this together. It would be great if perhaps by the next meeting or a couple of meetings after this that we could have that person to start working on putting things together, I like the idea of looking at, what the return is going to be, what kind of a time frame we might be looking at realistically on getting this paid off, and what the return will be. But the thing about this investment of $1 million is that it has the opportunity. It is an investment that has the opportunity to bring the money back to us. There aren't other investments in infrastructure that can bring the money back to us. So not only will the infrastructure itself, the water and the sewer, will pay for itself from the users and all of the tax dollars that will come in from property tax and from income tax. It is an investment that will repay itself. I would not support this project if I didn't believe it would succeed. Do I think we're going to have a full business park in 5 years? No, I don't think we will. But I think we'll have action, and I think that there will be some exciting opportunities happening. We've got zoning. I mean, as far as the type of business, zoning is our best tool to control that. We control the zoning code, and I think we just went through a pretty long process to make sure we got a zoning code in place that we supported and that supported this community's values. Nobody wants to put a business where they're not welcome, and I can't imagine a drone manufacturer that is going to want to be here when they have Springfield and Fairborn and wherever else. So I have no concern that a drone manufacturer is going to build drones in Yellow Springs. It's just not going to happen. I feel like, we're looking at this, at the construction schedule. It would be great to see this project moving forward in 2014. I'm hearing Lori's concerns. I would really love this to be a fully supported project by council, and more supported by the community. There's never going to be a proposal that's fully supported by the community, chances are. But I would like for council, I don't know if there are things that we could do, that we could kind of take a next step of.
Can I say something? I'm sat here going into my third year on council, and we've been discussing this topic, okay? We know what our construction window is for this year, okay? Any study we do is going to take of the magnitude that folks want to give them 80 to 90% guarantee will take years to get done. I think this council is going to have to make a decision on whether or not we're going to fund the road, okay? That's what it comes down to, okay? If we're not comfortable with it, let's take the vote and vote it down and move on. But to keep thinking that we're going to find some magic information or something that's not out there that folks have not looked at for years, it's not going to happen. So I myself, I'm ready to, if it takes a motion or whatever, let's vote it up or down and let's move on.
Marion, you had.
Yeah, I'd like to address Lori's concern. I think whether or not we fund the Commerce Park, we need to make a shift. The village government does. Because if we don't, we're going to continue the slide that we're on, which is older population, fixed income, a lot of people, but we're becoming a retirement community too. Essentially, no business growth, more difficult for young people to live here. I mean, we'll continue on the drift that we're doing, I'm concerned. So regardless of whether we fund the Commerce Park, if village government and citizens want this to be a diverse community that has job opportunities for a wide variety of citizens, we have to take this on, I think. So I think, we can let it slide, or we can argue about it forever, or we can say, I think looking at Antioch College and what they're taking on might be a model for us, they're trying to be the phoenix rising from the ashes. We don't have that, we haven't had that kind of thing happen. We're just sort of slowly drifting down.
I think there's energy right now, and I think that there is interest, and it takes a big idea, something big to happen to, I think, get people really motivated to kind of take on a big challenge. So
procedurally, what is our next, what are we, because this was just said next steps, and so
Right.
I found that vague.
Well, the next step, I think, is what Ken's asking, is that at the next meeting that he bring legislation that charges Squires and Sanders with the bonds, with the,
Yeah, I would ask them to bring the legislation to issue the bonds.
to issue the bonds.
And Ken, how much, what would be the fee to do that?
Depending on how many pieces you want, anywhere from $6,000 to $20,000. And I would ask them, for example, part of that is legislation to create a TIF district. That's probably something that can wait, because you're not going to have anything to tax until the park is done. So I'm guessing that, the TIF district, I'd have to ask the attorney, that could be done after the bonds are issued. That's a way to recover the cost, not a
Right.
key to the...
And I think that there are people that need to be involved in the TIF. As Dawn said, we need to talk to the auditor.
Well, the schools need to be...
The schools need to be involved. So I do think that's the next step discussion.
But what we're asking, what we would be asking Kent to do basically would be...
I have two requests.
Okay.
If you want to do it, is ask me to bring the legislation to the next meeting to issue the bonds, and tell me to go ahead and get the bid process started. Not that we would advertise, because what we have to do is we have a set of plans and specifications that have to be tweaked. Somebody has to put in the material that helps us meet the Taft-Hartley Act, for example, and meet other federal requirements. Then it has to go to the Corps of Engineers for them to say, yes, you can issue a request for bids based on these documents. So that's another 30-day process, probably, at minimum. So, and they need to go ahead together if you're going to do the work this year. Because if we're lucky, we'll be ready to go to bid in February, and maybe open bids in March, and then it'll be time to break ground.
So there will be no, resolution saying, yes, we're going to fund this. There will be resolution saying, yes, we're going to do this bond, we're going to have the bonding done.
That is funding.
That is funding.
Okay.
But until we spend the money.
Yeah, it says
we could spend $20,000 or $6,000 to do that, but if we don't spend the money, then we've just, And so we spend the money when we hire the contractor, when we put the project out to bids. We hire the contractor and we start paying them.
Yes.
Could you clarify that, please, once more about what your next, I thought I heard two different things.
Kent, would you repeat?
Yeah, what I'm suggesting... What I'm suggesting is I will go to a specialist attorney and ask them to write legislation, a draft, to bring back to council, hopefully at their next meeting, and maybe it may not be able to happen that quickly, that would enable them to borrow the money to fund the project.
So basically legislation that says, yes, go ahead.
Essentially, it's a big step in that direction. It's not the absolute final word, but I don't think it's,
How is it short of the final word?
because we haven't let a bid yet for construction, that would happen in February, probably, if we're lucky, to get everything going on time.
And Kent, you were also saying you wanted to submit the plans as they stand now to the Corps of Engineers?
No. I need to get help. I need to get the engineer in here. He's done the physical design and the specification, what kind of concrete, what kind of asphalt, grading, but there's an administrative layer that goes on top of that about how we'll manage the money and how we will meet federal requirements, things like the Taft-Hartley Act and so on. That wasn't part of the design. It's putting the finishing touches on a bid package that's actually ready to go out for contractors to look at.
Kent's asked for a motion. Does somebody want to make a motion?
Yeah, I move that we authorize Kent to go forward with, or the village manager, excuse me, to go forward with getting a bond package together for us and also start preliminaries on the bid package.
Second.
Discussion?
Yes, is it possible to say that we want to have that at our second meeting in January rather than the first meeting?
How much?
And the reason why I'm asking that, primarily, I know over the holidays it sort of foreshortens things, but also Brian had some thoughts about getting some people together to look at the plan.
Right.
And I just wanted to have some time, I mean, I've never seen this set of plans, to be able to look at them to see if there are some minor things that we might be able to do, and Dan had made some suggestions.
When you say you're talking about the plant, the construction plans for the road?
Yes. Well, not necessarily the road so much, but some of the detention areas.
Well, isn't that all part of the package that we were funded for? And regardless of what we did, it still would have to pass through the Corps of Engineers?
Well, yeah, if you went back and altered the surface drainage and the retention basins, you'd have to basically go back to the Corps of Engineers again. It's all, at this point, it's all been approved by them as meeting their technical standards.
And that's
So there's
what,
a technical component and an administrative component. The administrative component doesn't exist yet.
Right.
But the technical part has been reviewed by the Department of Transportation, by the Army Corps of Engineers. It's passed all the standards. It's been approved as not having any damaging environmental effects. You know, all those studies and examinations have been done at other levels. It's approved and ready to go, except for the administrative piece.
all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Oh, I'll say aye.
I'll go ahead and say aye, too.
Next item of business is council rules and procedures. You, in your packet, you had a very colorful markup of track changes, of things that, let's see, I think Brian had some input into it, Judy had some input into it, and I had some input into it. And then the final copy was ones with all of the changes accepted. Lori sent out an email on Saturday or over the weekend, commenting on a couple of things that I thought...
Can I remind people that we have to keep our meeting going and we have to keep the door open, so if, when people leave, you can be quiet and chat downstairs rather than up here, that would be great.
So I integrated Lori's comments. I thought they were good comments, so I integrated her comments into what I had done. What you saw on your table tonight is one piece of paper. It's page 3, because that's really the only place that there were any changes made. It's a bunch of stuff that's underlined. So we changed the, we put recess after order of business. Lori added to decorum to reference council and citizens, and then we switched the order of, I think, we switched the order of all 3 of those.
Yeah, so I put recess after the order of business because it's effectively something that affects the scheduling of the meeting, the agenda. And then decorum seems to me to be the overarching category. And I added the sentence that that people who are ignoring or violating council rules or refuse to follow orders of the presiding officer may be asked to leave the premises. And it's basically the idea that we're actually trying to guarantee freedom of speech by having orderly rules whereby people speak, so that no one person is dominating or using a loud voice from the back of the room to stifle speech. And so if people come in and they're being very disruptive in that way, we have to have the ability, and I think it's only fair to let people know that we have to have the ability to say, to ask people to leave. So that was probably the major sort of addition, was putting that sentence in to make sure that that's a clear sort of ground rule. And then after that, then the rules of the debate that we follow, which is Robert's Rules of Order, and then rules for citizen participation. It just seemed a more logical progression.
Any comments, or, I mean, this is, we don't adopt this by legislation, we just adopt it by motion, agree to it by motion. So is everybody okay with?
Yeah.
Yep.
Mary Ann? Yes. Okay. So,
I want to say thanks to everybody who worked on it. I know Karen put in some work, and Brian put in some work, so.
so I guess let's just go make a motion.
looks like Sue has a
excuse me. Oh,
question.
sorry, Sue, come
Can we
on.
make a comment?
Yes, please, come on
Absolutely.
up.
As a citizen, I can only tell you that it is very often insufficient to be able to make a reasoned and civil case for a point of view in 3 minutes' time. And I would ask council to try to grapple with those conflicts between timely meetings and giving ample opportunity for input, to come up with some mechanism whereby there could be a conversation of greater depth that a citizen can participate in that lasts more than 3 minutes. And thank you.
Thanks, Sue. I think that some of those things, as far as we may be discussing at our retreat, so at least I would like to. So I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the council rules and procedures with the changes submitted by Lori Askland.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And then on to our next order of business is, it's on to new business, scheduling and topics for a council retreat. So I don't know if we want to tackle that one tonight, or if you want to think about, we do.
Yeah, at least I want to have it scheduled, and I have a number of things I'd like to have considered, and I can send them out.
Well, let's, I mean, we're not going to be able to get it scheduled because because Judy's going to have to check sites. I mean, I think we're going to be able to maybe share some dates, share some potential timeframes and dates. I don't know that we'll be able to tie down an actual date tonight. I mean, so what are we thinking? Are we thinking January? Or do we think we have time to get it together in January?
Yeah.
Okay.
Get the top piece together or actually have the retreat?
Have the retreat. That's what we're all saying, have the
we
retreat.
should
Okay.
do it in January.
So, So we've got a meeting on the 6th, and then we've got a meeting on the 21st, which is a Tuesday because of Martin Luther King Day. I think Lori's schedule is probably the most restrictive.
Well, my first day of school starts on the 13th.
Oh.
Yeah, we're late starting. So I don't know that my schedule is that restrictive. I'm more flexible on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Monday, Wednesday, Fridays are pretty much impossible during the week.
Okay.
But have quite a bit of flexibility on Tuesday, Thursday. If I know in advance, I can block out time on Tuesday, Thursday, particularly if it's before 4:30 or 4 o'clock. But
So
yeah.
you're saying that even after the 13th, even after classes start, you could do an all-day
I could do
Tuesday or
a
Thursday?
all-day Tuesday or Thursday.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Or a Saturday. but
Okay. Because I
probably
can't do I can't do the 9th, and I can't imagine we can, the 7th just seems too soon, I mean, after the holidays, so I think we have to be looking after you get back to school.
That
I
would
mean,
be fine.
okay, so Tuesday, Thursday, or Saturday, what does everybody think?
I'm okay.
I'm okay.
I'm flexible.
With all of them, okay? I am too, so maybe I would even probably prefer a Saturday, to be honest, just,
I probably prefer a Tuesday or Thursday, but
yeah,
I would be
okay.
okay with a Saturday.
let's see. Well, we can't do the 21st because that's, well, I guess we could, but it's a council meeting. I don't think anybody wants to do it on the.
No.
No, not to me.
So then we're looking at January 23rd. The week before that is the 16th. Or the Tuesday would be the 14th. So I'd say, we're looking at January 14th, 16th, 23rd, 28th, or 30th.
Maybe you could do a survey, or it'd be probably good to,
What are you most comfortable with? And the rest of us are kind of flexible.
Yeah. Well, why don't we just even throw all of those dates out there? Let's talk a couple of minutes about location, because Judy's can then do a search for a location and reserve that, see what's available. I've had concerns with, it will be a public meeting, but I think council makes it known that we would prefer privacy. We would prefer that the purpose of a retreat is to be able to talk privately among ourselves. We look for a close location, we look for a location close to town, but I've felt concerned about some of the locations we've had recently not being private enough.
well, we had it out at the B&B a while.
And that one wasn't bad. I thought that, and then we also have to deal with food. I thought that Yellow Springs Country was actually not a bad location. If they didn't have somebody in their rooms, I mean, then we could actually, potentially even have Nora cook for us.
Then that's a Tuesday.
I know.
Well, no, that would cut out the rest of the town, so probably a
Okay.
Thursday would be better if we can get Nora to do that.
How about the 16th? Oh, but Judy you have to find that.
Yeah, I mean, let's say tentatively, is that where we want to say, tentatively, that's our optimum?
How about a second choice, just in
23rd.
Well, second
No,
choice for
no.
location.
Oh, okay.
Birch House, what does everybody think about the Birch House? Have you been, I mean, I've been in there, it's been a while.
That's been a while, yeah, so I've just been in once.
Okay.
That'd be nice.
Maybe check the Birch House. Yeah, maybe the Mill if they didn't. I would say the Mill is a third, as long as they didn't have, the B&Bs can't have lodgers.
But
Wouldn't
they're
make
not
a lot
going
of
to know at this point.
True, well, I mean, I think January 16th, we're probably not going to have to worry too much about it.
Okay.
Is there a conference room on the Antioch campus or in Antioch McGregor?
How about the Glen Building?
Glen Buildings, I think, is a little too public. I mean, it's just too open, I think.
We, I assume, pay,
They have a conference room.
so we could just ask. I mean, the Yellow Springs Country for example, are you willing for us to pay?
That's
basically
true.
Reserve the.
Yeah, that's true.
the-
Yeah, we would, yeah.
Thing for the day.
That's true, yeah. Okay, and then I think for the next meeting then, and even before that, I think we can just share, as long as we don't discuss via email items, we could share our lists of topics, potential topics, and then we could discuss it at the next meeting.
Well, why don't we, if people
share.
have them tonight, though, I can, maybe, did you say you had a list of things already?
Yeah.
And I have at least one thing, but I
Well,
think David mentioned.
just what was mentioned, how to allow greater citizen participation, more effective citizen participation during council meetings or in other meetings, public meetings. Having a system that's tracking projects that we've been involved in and things that we say we're going to do, to see that they get done, or at least that we agree that they're not going to get done. Economic development strategy. I guess we would review this past year's goals and see how we've done on them. Sidewalks, talking about sidewalks. Given that we are a tourist town, I'd like for us to be able to talk about the benefits and the costs of that, and are there things we can do to ameliorate the costs, and police and the police budget.
I saw the perfect lapel button, and I kicked myself ever since for not buying it in the short north in Columbus. I said, why do we call it tourist season if they don't let us shoot at them?
And then I had social media policy and commissions.
I don't have any because we're not going to get to all the ones that we just mentioned.
The main one I had was thinking about commissions and kind of organizing how we get done the work that we want to do. And so I think I would prioritize that one in particular.
And what I'm thinking, I think I raised it at the council, at the orientation we had, this idea of at least exploring and considering having one of our meetings be a regular council meeting as we had tonight, and the second meeting of the month being more of a work session. I think that is one I would like to explore, and another thing I would like to explore are committees, the use of committees, and I think that's kind of along the lines of what both you and Brian were suggesting, as opposed to commissions and committees that would be more oriented towards the business of council, like finance or infrastructure or parks and rec, that kind of thing. Those are things that I'm interested in. I think, I love your list, Mary, and I to be honest with you, I think some of those are really public topics. I mean, those are, some of those things that you mentioned are things that I see as more things that we should be discussing here, like the sidewalks and things like that. What I typically like to use we like to use the retreats for, I think, are things that we don't necessarily want to talk about at council meetings, that are more about our process as opposed to the business of the village, is typically, I mean, wouldn't you say that that's typically what we've used? So I think you've got a great list, but maybe not all of it for the retreat. Then we just have to figure out how to fit it all in. The goals discussion we will have. We'll have to figure that out in connection with the budget. We'll have that goals discussion, and that's probably something we need to put into agenda planning, so Judy.
I just don't want us to take on so many topics that we just don't get a chance to decide on any.
Right.
I agree.
Well, Judy, if you could just, maybe even a separate from the minutes, pull this together and share it with council, and we could, at the next meeting, we need to kind of determine, and then we'll also decide at the next meeting, if we want a facilitator, if we want any special guests to come and help us discuss any topics. Are we done with that? Okay. Kent, your report?
In the interest of brevity, I won't repeat what's in my written newsletter about safe routes to school, and, you want me to talk about the Gaunt Park lights? There was
Yes, please.
There was a flap the night before Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
We had a group of residents playing Frisbee at Gaunt Park, and one of our employees was driving down US 68 and noticed the lights were on, and called the police and asked them to turn the lights off. And the police went out and turned the lights off, and apparently there was no dialogue with the people who were there. So anyway, it was a typical miscommunication. This is a group that uses the field pretty regularly, but not unfailingly, and it's been pretty informal. They go, they use it, they come in after the fact and say, oh, we were there last week, and by the way, here's the money for the lights. They have their own key. So we're trying to tighten up the communication back and forth so people know what's going on. In this building, if I go to rooms A and B, or the dance room, or the crafts room, there's a schedule on the door that tells me who's supposed to be in there at what times, and we're supposed to be doing the same thing with Gaunt Park. It just doesn't always happen, so. But that's been squared away and shouldn't happen again.
Good.
I'm a little disappointed that they didn't realize that there was something out of the ordinary and that they should have maybe backed off.
And so the resolution was what, Ken? How are we-
We're going to do a more rigorous job internally of keeping each other informed of what's going on and what to expect.
Okay.
And the group has given up their key, so they're going to be treated the same as everybody else when they have a game. They tell us, the police go turn the lights on, and then after the game is over, the police turn the lights off.
Okay.
And that's our normal, whether it's softball, soccer, Frisbee, it doesn't matter. That's the way they all work, so.
Right. And then I just wanted to quickly ask a little bit about the safe routes for schools.
Sure.
Just what, I guess specifically what the,
Well, there was going to be a 6-month delay in the construction.
right.
And I called and they said, oh, it's no reflection on you or what you've done. We just think the engineer is moving slowly and he may not be ready in time to do it. So the person who is managing this project for ODOT works in Lebanon at District 8 headquarters, and he is on paternity leave. He'll be back full-time after January 1st. And we're talking about 2015 or 2016, so it's in the future. So I'm going to go see him in January.
Okay.
And try to push
Right.
the project back up to its original schedule.
Because I knew we had a benchmark of some sort in November, but that's what's been pushed back.
Well, everything they needed, they got in November.
Okay, good.
So, yeah, they needed priorities. Which projects did we want to fund and in what order? And they have that.
Great.
So, but I don't understand, why do we have to wait 2 or 3 years?
Because ODOT is doing it. That's
But you're
their-
going to try to not have us wait that long. is
I'm
that
gonna,
right?
well, no.
No, it
but
was always fiscal year 2015.
It was always
Oh,
2015, yeah, just because that's the speed at which ODOT moves.
But fiscal year.
But they're doing the whole
is that
project. They're doing-
July 2014, or is that January 2015 for their fiscal year?
I don't know what they're.
I think it's July. I think that they do have a June or July
June,
fiscal
right, ends
year.
in June and starts in July is typical.
But they are doing the whole project, Mary Ann. They're doing the engineering and design, they're doing the bidding, they're supervising the construction. It's a turnkey project.
And they're paying for it.
And they're paying for it.
Actually, we're paying for it, and then they're reimbursing us.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's a reimbursement.
Yeah.
Apparently Laura Curlis worked with the Greene County Development Office and secured a $34,000 grant for us for next year. Bring our handicap ramps at the sidewalk intersections up to grade. In some of those places, we already have ramps, but they don't have the approved texture so that someone who's visually impaired can tell they're there. So that's going to be, that will be happening this year.
And we should do more sidewalk work. It kind of didn't happen this year.
Okay.
It's to happen.
And then we did get a letter from the Ohio Department of Agriculture about the application of herbicides at the pool, and they said we should not have done that. And, well, and if we do that, we're subject to penalties and fines, but they didn't say they were going to fine us or penalize us this time, so I'm assuming that was a warning. I've had one other request by a scout group that wants to clean up the amphitheater behind Bryan Center here, and I'm assuming you all know that down next to the stream, there's an amphitheater that's not in use, and it gets overgrown and seedy, and every once in a while, somebody thinks, that's a great asset, we ought to clean it up, and they do, and then it lapses again. And so my only advice was, I didn't think anybody would object to having it cleaned up, but that I thought the real key was some kind of a marketing proposal to keep its presence and availability before the public so that it gets more use, and therefore it would be kept up. So, but it's Girl Scouts this time. It's usually an Eagle.
Have they been down
Yes.
there?
Oh, yeah, they
I
brought it.
mean, what time frame did they go down there? Because
From the pictures, Jerry, it would have been late summer, early fall.
Cause we had another group that did come in and look at.
Oh.
Yeah, so you might
take
want to get with Jason and Kelly, because I know we spent a good 3 hours down there.
Okay, I'll talk to Jason, okay. And I'll,
Cleanup is a little,
Okay.
because I'm wondering when they talk about cleanup, because it's, we'll talk to the guys about it.
Okay.
Because, I wouldn't be comfortable having young kids down there, trying to clean up,
well, I asked them if any of the Girl Scouts had a stonemasonry merit badge.
The reason I say it, because there's a lot of rock down
yeah.
there with a lot of moss on it, and depending on the time of year you're down there, you could really get hurt.
Okay.
And I saw grown folks doing this type of stuff, trying to keep it balanced, so,
So gimps like me should avoid it.
Put it this way, I took my time going up and down. You
Okay.
shouldn't go down.
Okay, thank you. That's all I had.
Thanks, Ken. Judy? I have your 2014 schedule for council and commission meetings, and if you want to just give that a look over, that's actually going into the paper, we think next week, so if you have any changes, give them to me.
Can you make sure that gets into our electronic packet next time? I like to have an electronic version
Yeah,
of it.
it didn't, yeah, it's just got done today because.
No, I know.
I'll put it in for next.
Not a critique, I just want to make sure it gets into
Well,
our
and also it'll be
packet.
posted on the site.
Right.
Corner West, the site, as soon as we get it locked in, so if you notice any discrepancies, let me know.
Anything else? Standing reports, we'll just kind of go down the list. Lori, do you have anything to report from planning?
No. I don't think so.
Jerry?
None from mediation, none from community resource, what else I have? And the library, I think you had I thought I saw the report in their minutes in there, so.
Okay. Brian?
Yeah, well, I'll just kind of tag on to what we talked about last meeting. HRC has had a lot of energy this year, a lot of great projects, supporting the block parties. We talked about earlier in the meeting the day for International Day for people with disabilities, and the Rain Barrel project, which I do want to mention. The deadline for that to submit a proposal is December 27th. So we're definitely looking for some interesting projects there to promote harmony in the village. And I guess I'll just say quickly about the community access panel. We have high-speed internet in the building now, at least CAP does, and that's exciting. We have a new controller coming in that's going to allow for processing the video so we can get meetings up online and lots of other things quicker. And this is another commission that's got a lot of energy behind making some positive changes, so very exciting.
Good.
Could we make sure that, I think the sound in here is still not great, and I asked for this to happen last year and it never happened. I would really like it to be a priority and have it happen early in the year. That we get, that microphone is ridiculous. Because it comes apart. It's just ridiculous. And these help maybe for the screen, but they don't seem that great within this room. And especially if, when I get tired, I tend to speak quietly, it's hard, so it's really, it would be good if we could just please get this sorted.
Now, but you're asking community access to work on that, or should we have someone else?
Well,
I think it's gotta be.
unless Paul objects, tomorrow morning at 8:45, I have a doctor's appointment, and right across the street is my former employer, the Miami Valley Communications Council, and their engineer would be the person I would ask for advice on sound systems.
Oh, that'd be
So I'll
great.
walk across the
I'd love to
street.
get him, maybe even have him come out and
Sure,
take a
oh,
look.
absolutely.
Yeah, and if, I would just be so grateful if we could get that, because I think I
Okay
made
with
the
you, Paul, or
same speech
something
last
you
year.
wanna take
The
up?
Oh, we
same
talked
meeting.
about
And then, the other thing that would also be good, as long as we're on this kind of, it would be great if we had a timer that would say the amount of time that would be visible from the microphone, so people could watch. And so if we could have that, that would be awesome.
Does such a thing
So we want a
exist?
countdown
Oh,
timer.
it absolutely
Oh, yeah, they
exists.
exist, yeah.
Wait, you gotta show me your website.
Okay, so two of them are gonna find something. Mary, are you done, Brian? That's all of yours?
Just one more thing on the Public Arts Commission. So I've started to talk to the group about sort of reviving and, possibly working on projects like we talked about the skate park and, potential renovations there and some other things. And I do want to mention that John Fleming submitted a resume. And actually, we do have a spot that's, Nevin Merced is in Florida now, indefinitely. So I would like to propose that, that John does fill that spot, at least in the interim.
Second?
Are you
You
making a
do that
motion?
one? Yeah, I second
Yeah,
it.
I'll move. Yeah.
I second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. One other thing for the Public Art Commission is, I was looking at some notes from some kind of things that were not resolved as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if there has been kind of final coordination and decision on the public art project, on where which village location that is going to be, and that it's been approved and everybody's copacetic with that. So you
Okay.
might want to check with Joanne and our staff to see
Okay.
where that stands. Mary Ann?
Yes, the Energy Board met last week, and Jim Hammond came and talked about the hotel that he's building on the Bar property. He talked about some of the energy features that they are incorporating, and people from the Energy Board made some suggestions, including looking into possibly becoming LEED certified, and also buying the credits from the Antioch Solar Farm as a possibility to help with the LEED certification. There was some discussion about the Antioch Solar Farm and the agreement with the village in terms of the electric cost to Antioch. One of the people on the board is employed by the solar business that probably will put up the solar panels. Also, we talked about next meeting, and there's a group that used to be called 2-for-1 Energy that have developed an online program that citizens can use to monitor and reduce their energy consumption, so they're going to make a presentation. And I also said that I wanted to talk to the Energy Board about what role they might play in looking at energy sustainability as far as the CBE goes. Then, in terms of the Economic Sustainability Commission, I'm going to contact all of the former members to for a meeting to talk about, is there still a role in terms of economic development strategy, in terms of policies that we might want to develop for the CBE, in terms of dealing with potential businesses that would come in, and what are the kinds of things that the village would offer or wouldn't offer. And Ellen Hoover, I think, they had already drafted a draft policy in that regard.
Incentive policy.
Yeah, incentive policy, yeah.
Is that it? That's it. Thank you. Okay, on to future agenda items. So one thing so we'll have the second reading of this, the ordinance about the alley vacation. We'll also have a retreat discussion.
Did you want the legislation to issue bonds?
Yes.
If I can get it.
Goals discussion, do you want that a little further down the road?
Let's look at that for the next meeting.
For the next or the 6th?
I mean, let's just say council start thinking about it. Why don't we'll put 2013 goals in the next packet, and then we'll just start thinking about it.
Yep.
And also, Chief Pettiford would like to speak on the 6th, kind of give us an update about what's going on in the police department.
Okay.
Resolution regarding management partners.
That was the,
Right, oh yeah. Kent, where do we stand on Dayton Pool and having a kind of a year-end closeout
Oh, yes.
report from
Yeah,
them?
we can do that.
Okay, and then will you,
And finances.
okay, right.
Yeah.
Budget process, is that what you're?
No, the financial aspects of the pool operation in 2013.
And then, but then there was something that we were gonna kind of fine tune the budget process. Did we say they were gonna do that? Okay.
Yes. Yeah, by then, Melissa will be a veteran with almost a month.
So we'll put the resolution authorizing bids for the pool management, let's put that off at least till the second meeting in January.
we want to hear the report.
Yes, yeah. And John Eastman will be present at the January 6th meeting. He'll be there to make the proposal, or to present the proposal.
And,
Did the trustees meet the same day?
yeah, I think we have to make sure to put him as late as possible.
That's first Monday?
Why, what is he, oh, right.
He's a township trustee.
Forgot, he's a trustee now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Or the other possibility, they don't meet the second Tuesday. They meet, I think they meet the
meet on the
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
So we
Yeah.
could possibly put it off until the second meeting in January, because it won't be a conflict at all with him.
Well, or you could put him late in the evening.
Why don't we put him on the January 6th?
Yeah, the trustees don't
And then
run that one.
if it doesn't work, then we can always do it on the second one, but I'd like to get moving on that.
I don't know, I mean, John will probably have a detailed presentation, and I don't know if we necessarily want to have that late in the meeting.
How, Brian, could you fill us in a little bit on Tony's presentation? How much time do you think he's going to want?
I think 5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
It's Tony.
That's true. Man of
few words.
Yes.
Yeah, and I should mention, he's also going to speak at the HRC meeting on the 2nd.
Okay.
And I think it'll be similar, just kind of letting the village know what things are going on in the police department, including a safety town, which I think is really cool.
Okay, cool. I hear what you're saying, Lori, but I think it might be easier, and we do have a pretty hefty agenda already, so let's put John on the
Second meeting of
the second meeting in January, whatever that date is.
21st, I think you said.
Yeah.
22nd.
22nd, and that's the Tuesday.
Yeah,
That way,
22nd.
that way we don't have a conflict at all. Okay.
Yeah, and there's nothing to say that, well, in fact, if the report's available later this week or early next week, I'll share it with you then. So
Right,
we can
okay.
at least
It's
begin-
just him coming to present, so.
Right.
Okay, and then ordinance 213-29, I mean, should we just go ahead and change the number on that? returning easement number 5 to the village, since we're going to be hearing it in January.
Oh, I
It's
wasn't looking at it yet.
2014.
Now, when is our second meeting in January?
It's the 22nd.
It's Tuesday because,
Well, I'm looking at our calendar there, and it's showing the 22nd on a Wednesday, that's why I'm...
Yeah, it is the 21st.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It is the 21st.
Okay.
21st, yeah,
Oh, sorry,
sorry.
yep, 21st, that was me.
Okay.
okay.
Yeah, I don't know why I was misreading that. Totally. I can stare at a calendar.
And is that going to be 2 readings, the ordinance for the Glen, or are we going to try to do that as an emergency?
It doesn't need to be an emergency, I don't think.
Okay, so it sounds like we're set for the next couple of meetings.
Sidewalks. I don't know if you keep a running list, but I do want to see sidewalks get on
Well,
the agenda.
I guess I feel like that will definitely be part of the budget discussion. I mean, that will be something, and I think that's one of those things that I think we put into goals. And that's an easy way. We'll talk about goals, we'll put timetables. The fact that it is a significant budget item will,
Okay.
you know, maybe one thing that Kent and potentially Judy could do in the time being, there are documents, there are some pretty significant documents about sidewalks that started back in Eric Swanson's time. Large drawings, large boards showing sidewalk conditions, showing maps, showing plans of all of the sidewalks. So maybe if we could start to pull some of those materials out, and I think staff has gone around and done sidewalk assessments. So if we could come with those materials to consider, and maybe staff could look at those ahead of time and put some thoughts together. Because to me, what we need is a plan. I mean, I think what we haven't been operating with a very concise plan of where we really need to concentrate and what our strategy.
It would
Yeah,
include the,
Should get with Jason, because me and him have gone around to a number of different sites where sidewalks were horrible, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think to me, if it's like this, we should be doing something right now.
No, I mean, they're like.
Well, yes, and it's frustrating to me that we have sidewalks that are like that, so.
Well, and that was an Ed Amrine job, wasn't it?
Right, I mean, there is definitely significant material, there is significant supporting material for us
We
to.
looked at downtown, but the surrounding area, if I'm correct, we took over sidewalks, and it's more
Right.
than just downtown that we're not.
Right, but there's a plan for the whole town.
Right.
There's, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So move.
second?
I don't think we vote, do we? Do we vote on adjournment?
Yes, you do.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Can't just vote with
Not,
your
you
feet.
can't argue about it.